Most people think the biggest mistakes in life happen because of bad decisions. But sometimes, the worst ones begin with good intentions. Nobody in these stories was trying to do something dangerous. Nobody was looking for trouble. They simply wanted to help someone. They opened a car door. They unlocked a building. They let someone into a place they believed was safe. And years later, every one of them still thinks about that moment. Because sometimes, the hardest part isn't knowing you made the wrong decision. It's never finding out if it really was. It was raining so hard that night, I almost didn't see him. He was standing beneath what looked like an old bus stop sign. No umbrella, no backpack, no phone. Just standing there. He wasn't waving at cars. He wasn't trying to get anyone's attention. Honestly, if I hadn't looked in my mirror, I probably would have forgotten him 5 seconds later. I drove another 50 feet. Then something made me slow down. Maybe because I'd been stranded in the rain before. Maybe because he looked completely soaked. Or maybe because he never once asked for help. I was the one who decided to stop. I backed the car up, rolled down the passenger window. "You need a ride?" He walked over without rushing. For a second, I thought he was going to refuse. Instead, he quietly asked, "Are you heading east?" "Yeah." He nodded once. Then, "Thank you." He opened the passenger door. The moment it closed, the sound of the rain almost disappeared. The inside of the car became strangely quiet. He fastened his seatbelt, folded his hands together, and stared through the windshield. No introduction. No small talk. Nothing. I pulled back onto the road. After about a minute, I finally asked, "So, rough night?" You could say that. His voice was calm, not tired, not nervous, just calm. "You live around here?" "A little farther." "What were you doing out there?" He kept looking through the windshield. "I missed my ride." "The bus?" He shook his head. "No." That should have ended the conversation. Instead, it somehow made me even more curious. The windshield wipers moved back and forth. The rain kept getting heavier. Finally, he spoke again. "I appreciate this. Most people don't stop anymore." I smiled. Honestly, I almost didn't. I know. That answer made me look at him. "You know? You drove past first, then you came back." I laughed. "Yeah, I felt bad." He looked out the window. "You seem like the kind of person who would." There was something strange about the way he said it. It didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like he'd expected it. The road ahead was completely empty. No traffic. No streetlights. Nothing except rain. A few minutes later, he pointed ahead. "You can let me out at the next intersection." I slowed down. There isn't anything there. I know. The intersection sat between two empty roads. No houses, no stores, no gas station. Nothing. You sure? He nodded. I pulled over. He unbuckled his seatbelt. Then, for the first time, he looked directly at me. His face didn't look angry, or grateful, or scared. It was almost impossible to read. Thank you. No problem. He reached for the door handle, then stopped. You shouldn't stop for people anymore. I laughed. What? He stepped out into the rain, closed the passenger door gently, and started walking. Not toward the trees, not down either road, just straight through the middle of the intersection. I watched him in my mirror. Then another car pulled in behind me. Its headlights filled the glass. I drove away. When I looked back again, he was gone. For the next week, I kept replaying that last sentence. You shouldn't stop for people anymore. It was a strange way to thank someone, almost like a warning. A few days later, I mentioned the story to a coworker during lunch. He shrugged. Maybe the guy was just weird. Yeah, probably. Then he asked one question. So, where exactly was that bus stop? I pulled out my phone, opened Google Maps, found the road, zoomed in, then frowned. Something wasn't right. There wasn't a bus stop. I switched to Street View. Still nothing. I even looked at older images. Nothing. According to every map I could find, there had never been a bus stop on that road. Not now, not years ago, not ever. I still drive that road sometimes, usually after work, whenever it rains. I'd slowed down at that same intersection. Not because I expect to see him again. Because every time I pass that spot, the first thing I remember isn't his face. It's the sound of the passenger door closing. Sometimes helping a stranger ends exactly the way you'd expect. Other times, you spend years wondering who you really invited inside. The next story starts with an unlocked apartment door. Behind that door, I thought I was doing someone a favor. I got home from work just after midnight. It had been one of those long days where you don't even remember the drive home. All I wanted was a shower and a few hours of sleep. My apartment building was quiet. The lobby lights were on. The mailboxes were empty. As I reached for the front door, someone behind me called out, "Hold on." I turned around. A man was jogging across the parking lot, maybe 30 years old, wearing a dark hoodie, completely out of breath. Thanks. My key fob stopped working. He held up a small keychain. I think the battery died. I glanced at the keypad beside the entrance. It wasn't unusual. The building automatically locked after 10 every night. Residents either used a key or a key fob. He smiled. I live here. I just can't get in. It sounded perfectly reasonable. I pulled the door open. No problem. He stepped inside. The heavy glass door closed behind us. The sound echoed through the empty lobby. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he looked toward the elevators. What floor? 8. He nodded. Me too. We walked over together, pressed the elevator button, waited in silence. The elevator arrived. We stepped inside. 8 floors isn't a long ride, but somehow it felt unusually quiet. The display changed. 2, 3, 4. Neither of us spoke. When the doors opened on the 8th floor, I stepped out. He stayed inside. I turned around. You coming? He smiled politely. In a minute. The doors closed. I figured maybe he'd forgotten something downstairs, or maybe he'd pressed the wrong button. By the time I unlocked my apartment, I'd already stopped thinking about him. The following evening, I ran into the building manager while checking my mailbox. We talked for a minute about a package that had been delivered to the wrong apartment. As I was about to head upstairs, he sighed. Rough night. What happened? Some guy spent almost an hour wandering around the building. I frowned. What do you mean? He rang apartment doors, tried the storage rooms, even checked the emergency stairwells. They never stole anything. They just... He shrugged. Wandered. Something about that word made my stomach tighten. What did he look like? The manager pulled out his phone. We caught him on camera. He showed me a still image. A man, wearing a dark hoodie, standing outside someone's apartment door. The picture was too blurry to make out his face, but I recognized the jacket immediately. Did you know him? I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then handed the phone back. No. I lied. The manager slipped the phone into his pocket. People keep letting strangers into this building. Then everyone acts surprised. I didn't answer, because technically, he wasn't a stranger anymore. I'd been the one who opened the door. For the next few weeks, I became that person. The one who waited to see someone use a key. The one who watched from a distance before opening the entrance. The one who let the glass door close instead of holding it for whoever was walking behind me. A few neighbors probably thought I was rude. Maybe I was. Then one rainy evening, an elderly woman struggled toward the entrance carrying 2 heavy grocery bags. She smiled. Would you mind holding the door? For just a second, I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to help. Because I remembered that night. The lobby, the elevator, the man who smiled and said, "Me too." I opened the door anyway. She thanked me, walked inside, and disappeared toward the elevators. I stood there for a few seconds after she was gone, wondering whether fear had made me suspicious, or whether one simple decision had quietly changed the way I looked at everyone. Sometimes, opening a door doesn't change the person who walks through it. It changes the person who opened it.
The last time someone asked to come inside.
It wasn't an apartment building, it was a warehouse. And outside, the rain just wouldn't stop. It had been raining since sunset. By the time my shift was ending, the loading docks looked more like shallow ponds than concrete. I worked security at a distribution warehouse on the edge of town. Most nights were quiet. Lock the gates, turn off the lights, go home. That night, I was finishing the last patrol when I heard someone knocking on the employee entrance. 3 quick knocks. I checked the monitor first. A delivery driver, mid-30s, wearing a soaked reflective jacket, standing in the rain. I unlocked the door just enough to speak through it. "We're closed. I know. My van won't start." He pointed toward the parking lot. A white delivery van sat with its hazard lights flashing. I already called roadside assistance. They said 45 minutes. He looked back at the rain. "Would you mind if I waited inside?" "Just until they get here." It sounded reasonable. The warehouse was almost empty. My supervisor had already gone home. The loading crews were gone. Only 2 office lights were still on. I opened the door. "Come in," he smiled. "I appreciate it." The heavy steel door closed behind him. The sound echoed through the warehouse. He stayed near the vending machines. Didn't wander. Didn't ask strange questions. I offered him a bottle of water.
We talked about the weather.
Traffic. Old delivery vans. Nothing unusual. Every few minutes. He glanced toward the entrance, like he was waiting for someone. About 20 minutes later, his phone buzzed. He checked the screen. "They're here." He stood up, walked toward the door. I unlocked it. Before stepping outside, he stopped, turned toward me. "Thanks." I nodded. "No problem." He rested one hand on the door, then quietly said, "Lock it behind me." He stepped into the rain. A tow truck had pulled in beside his van. They waved to each other. I closed the door, turned the lock, and listened to the latch click shut. The following afternoon, my supervisor called me into his office. He already had the security footage open. "You should see this." The entrance camera showed exactly what I remembered. I let the driver inside. We walked into the warehouse together. Then, he switched to another camera. The hallway. The driver walked past. Alone. Another camera. The break room. Alone. Another. The loading dock. Alone. Every camera after the entrance showed only one person. I stared at the monitor. That's impossible. I was standing right beside him. My supervisor didn't answer. He simply rewound the footage. We watched it again. Same result. The entrance camera showed 2 people. Every other camera showed one. I never found an explanation. Maybe one of the cameras malfunctioned. Maybe several of them did. Maybe there was something everyone overlooked. I honestly don't know. What I do know is that I still work at that warehouse. And every time someone knocks after closing, I check the monitor first. Then I check it again. Looking back, I opened every door myself. Thanks for watching. Sleep well.